My wedding dress lay in the closet, untouched, a ghost of silk and promise. On the other side of the bedroom door, I heard the sound that had split my life in two. His laughter, intertwined with someone else's, a lighter, younger laugh. I didn't need to see it. I felt it. The sound of two champagne glasses clinking. The same champagne we were supposed to drink at the altar. It was our wedding day, and I was being betrayed in our future home, just feet from where I was adjusting the veil he would help me remove. The ground didn't open beneath my feet, it dissolved. My body, which I had prepared for months to fit into that dress, suddenly felt like a stranger, an empty shell that no longer belonged to me. In that instant, a brutal truth settled within me, a poisonous seed that would grow for years. My worth, my love, my very existence could be exchanged for a thinner body, for a youth I no longer possessed. That moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a slow, silent demolition, the demolition of myself. In the months that followed, the mirror became my enemy. I didn't see a woman mourning a lost love. I saw the reason for the loss. Every curve, every shadow on my body was a testament to my failure. Her image, which I'd never seen but imagined 1,000 times, thin, radiant, effortless, haunted me, and I began my punishment. The first phase was hunger. I believed that if I could empty my body, perhaps I could empty the pain. I ate tasteless leaves, drank bitter teas that promised miracles, and weighed myself 5, 6, 7 times a day, seeking absolution in the numbers that dropped. And they did. For a time. I felt weak, dizzy, but I saw in my bones a form of victory emerging, an empty victory. Because the sadness was still there, heavy, dense, and the hunger only sharpened it. My friends said I looked great, that revenge was a perfect body. But it wasn't revenge, it was self-flagellation. And it wasn't a perfect body, it was a body starved for life. If you've ever felt like your body had become a prison, a reflection of a pain you can't name, I invite you to stay with me. Subscribe to this channel, because the journey I'm about to tell you about isn't about losing weight, it's about rebuilding a life from the rubble. The second phase was exhaustion. When hunger became unbearable, I turned to the punishment of movement. I ran until my lungs burned, lifted weights until my muscles screamed. I wanted to exhaust my body to the point where my mind wouldn't have the strength to remember, to hurt. Every drop of sweat was a tear I wouldn't let myself cry. I became a machine. I woke up, worked, trained, slept, without joy, without pleasure. The weight on the scale stabilized, but the shape of my body changed in a strange way. I was thinner in some places, but a new layer of fatigue seemed to settle around my waist, a stubborn bloat that no amount of running or sit-ups could touch. It was as if sadness itself was solidifying within me. I was trapped in a cycle of punishment. I saw other women, happy, eating a piece of cake guilt-free, living their lives with a lightness I'd forgotten existed. And I wondered, what was their secret? What was I doing so wrong? I followed every rule, read every magazine, copied every celebrity diet. I was doing everything society told me to do, to be desirable, to be better. And yet, I was falling apart inside, and my body, despite all my efforts, seemed to be in a state of permanent civil war. The truth, which would take me years to discover, was that I wasn't fighting fat. I was fighting the biology of trauma. I was trying to patch a crack in the foundation of my being with a fresh coat of paint, hoping no one would notice that the entire structure was about to give way. That day, the day of my non-wedding, hadn't just broken my heart. It had broken the communication between my mind and my body, triggering a silent state of emergency that no diet in the world could shut off. I was a house in ruins, still trying to rearrange the furniture while the ceiling collapsed on my head. That was my lowest point, the moment when, looking at my exhausted, bloated reflection, I realized that the path I was following, didn't lead to redemption. It led to disappearance. And for the first time in a long time, a new question arose in my mind, not about how I could punish myself further, but about what fundamentally was broken within me. The epiphany came not in a gym or in front of a plate of salad, but on a sleepless night with dozens of tabs open on my computer. I had given up on easy solutions. The pain of failure was greater than the promise of any new diet. So I started digging, no longer in fitness blogs, but in endocrinology articles, in psychology forums, in studies on the impact of chronic stress on the female body. And that's when I began to understand. I wasn't weak. I wasn't undisciplined. I was a soldier fighting a war I didn't know existed against an enemy I couldn't see. The first enemy I identified was what I called the architect of disinformation. It was this cacophony of contradictory advice that bombards us every day. A multi-billion-dollar industry that thrives on our insecurity. Eat little, but not too little. Do cardio, but not too much to avoid catabolism. Eat fat, avoid fat. Eat carbs, cut carbs. It was a maze designed to keep us lost, buying the next solution, the next book, the next program. They build the prison and then sell us keys that don't fit any lock. They profit from every failed attempt because each failure reinforces the belief that the problem is us, not the system they created. This external villain was the noise pollution that prevented me from listening to my body's true needs. It sold me the idea that my body was a simple calories in, calories out machine, a convenient lie that ignores the complex orchestra of hormones, emotions, and personal history that governs a woman's body. But there was a deeper, more dangerous enemy, the internal villain. I called it the echo of betrayal. Because that's exactly what it was. The shock of that day, the pain of humiliation and abandonment, wasn't just a psychological event. It was a biological one. It triggered an emergency switch in my body, a cascade of cortisol, the stress hormone, that never completely shut off. This echo was a voice whispering in my system 24 hours a day. You're in danger. Conserve energy, store everything. It was the voice that made me crave sugar and fat late at night, not out of hunger, but out of a primal need for comfort and survival. It was the voice that told my metabolism to slow down, to save every calorie as if tomorrow were uncertain. It was the voice that created that stubborn belly fat, the hallmark of chronic stress. No restrictive diet could overcome this echo because restriction was just another danger signal to my already panicked body. Dieting, to my system, was like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it. I was literally at war with myself. My body interpreted the effort to lose weight as yet another attack, yet another threat, and it responded in the only way it knew how, by protecting itself, shutting down, storing even more. It was a painful and liberating revelation. The guilt, that constant companion for years, began to dissipate. It wasn't my lack of willpower. It was my biology doing exactly what it was designed to do in the face of a perceived threat. The problem was, the threat wasn't a tiger in the jungle. It was a memory that became a hormonal pattern, a ghost that haunted my cells. Understanding this was like finding the blueprint of my own prison. I could finally see the walls, the bars, the defense mechanisms. I still didn't know how to get out, but for the first time, I knew there was a way out. And it wasn't in punishing myself anymore, but in understanding the architecture of my own pain. I realized that the journey to reclaim my body and my life wouldn't be about demolition. It would have to be about rebuilding, a careful, intelligent rebuilding from the foundation. I wondered how many other women were trapped in the same trap, fighting their own bodies, unaware that the real enemy was an echo of the past, a biological response to an emotional wound. If my story resonates with yours, if you've ever felt at war with your own reflection, tell me in the comments. What was the lie about weight loss you believed the longest? Let's expose these architects of disinformation together. Discovering the true enemies was the first step, but it was still theoretical knowledge. It was like having the blueprint for a ruined building. I knew what was wrong, but I didn't know what material to use for reconstruction. My search shifted focus. I stopped searching for diets and started researching metabolic restoration and neurohormonal. It was a journey through obscure corners of the internet, through scientific articles I barely understood at first, translating technical terms with the help of online tools. I was obsessed. I wanted to find the key, the missing piece, the knowledge that would connect it all. And then I found it. It wasn't on a famous website or a best-selling book. It was on an old, nearly abandoned blog by a molecular biologist who was also fascinated by architectural history. The post title was The Wisdom of Cathedrals, Cellular Resilience, and Metabolic Mortar. I was paralyzed. It was as if the universe had created that content just for me. I began reading, and the world around me faded away. She explained that the great Gothic cathedrals survived for centuries, not just by the brute strength of their stones, but by the intelligence of their mortar. A mortar that wasn't completely rigid, but had a certain flexibility to absorb the shocks of time, the small vibrations, the changes in temperature. A structure that was too rigid, she said, cracked under pressure. A resilient structure adapts. And then came the phrase that changed everything for me. The human body is no different. A healthy metabolism isn't a fast or slow metabolism. It's a flexible metabolism. The biologist was describing a state called metabolic flexibility, the body's innate ability to efficiently switch between burning carbohydrates and burning fat for fuel, depending on need. A metabolically flexible body doesn't panic when you eat a carbohydrate, nor does it despair for energy if you skip a meal. It simply adapts. It has the wisdom of a cathedral. And what causes the loss of this flexibility? What makes our metabolism rigid, fragile, and prone to cracking? Chronic stress, the echo of betrayal. Constant cortisol sends a unified message to the body. Burn sugar fast. We need immediate energy to fight or flee, and store everything else as fat, because we don't know when we'll have food again. The body loses the ability to access its own fat reserves calmly and efficiently. It becomes a sugar addict, rigid and inflexible. That's when the framework of the aggregating revelation took shape in my head. It wasn't that calories don't matter or that exercise doesn't work. It was the missing piece. It was the mortar. My diet and exercise efforts were like stacking high-quality rocks, healthy food, movement, with weak, brittle mortar, a rigid metabolism. At the first pressure, the first slip, the first stressful week, everything crumbled. The solution wasn't to stack fewer rocks or to stack them faster. The solution was to repair the mortar. The biologist called the process of restoring this flexibility mitochondrial matrix activation, but the name was too technical. In my head, with my story, I renamed it. I called it the Matrix Protocol. Matrix, as in the foundation of everything. Matrix, as in the womb, the place of creation. It was about rebuilding the energetic foundation of my cells. I kept reading, frantically, and found the principle of validation by resonance. In one of the post's comments, an anonymous woman told her story. A traumatic divorce, unexplained weight gain, years of failed diets, the feeling of being broken inside, the discovery of metabolic flexibility. It was like reading my own diary, written by a stranger. Every word validated my pain, my struggle, my quest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. That narrative echo was proof I was on the right path. I wasn't chasing another crazy theory. I was getting closer to a fundamental truth about how the female body responds to pain. The post concluded by discussing a specific set of micronutrients and botanical compounds, cellular signaling, that acted as the key ingredients in the metabolic mortar. These weren't common vitamins or minerals, but rare adaptogens, polyphenols, and trace elements that helped modulate the stress response, calm the echo of betrayal at the cellular level, and teach cells to become flexible again. The idea was so simple and yet so profound. I didn't need to declare war on my body. I needed to give it the right tools to heal itself. I needed to provide the ingredients for the mortar it had forgotten how to make. That knowledge was my blueprint for rebuilding. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of genuine hope. Not the fragile hope of a new diet, but the solid hope of a new understanding. I had a plan that wasn't about restriction, but about restoration. I was going to repair my foundation, cell by cell, and I knew that if I could do it, I wouldn't just lose weight. I would rebuild myself, stronger, more resilient, and more whole than ever. With the map in hand, the blueprint for my own reconstruction, I needed to find the building materials. The Matrix Protocol was a powerful but still abstract idea. I needed to make it real. The biologist in her post listed the cellular signalers, the ingredients of that metabolic mortar, but she didn't provide a ready-made recipe. They were strange names, plant extracts from distant places, minerals I'd never heard of. My first attempt was what I called the rustic approach. I spent weeks researching where to find these compounds in nature. I discovered that some were in specific roots, others in rare tea leaves, others in adaptogenic mushrooms. I became a kind of kitchen alchemist. My refrigerator and pantry transformed into a botanical laboratory. I made decoctions of earthy roots, blended smoothies with green powders that smelled like rainforest, and tried to find a balance between it all. It was expensive, it was time-consuming, and to be honest, the taste was more often than not awful. I was trying to build a cathedral with hand tools, mixing mortar in a bucket. My husband, or rather my ex-husband, would have laughed at me. He would have said it was just another one of my crazy antics. But the echo of betrayal inside me, that self-critical voice, was a little quieter, because something was happening. It wasn't a dramatic overnight weight loss. It was something much more subtle and profound. The first thing I noticed was the silence, that constant mental noise, that anxiety vibrating under my skin began to subside. I slept a full night, not waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing for the first time in years. Then I noticed a mental clarity I hadn't felt since before the trauma. The brain fog, which I thought was just part of my tired personality, began to dissipate. It was as if someone was cleaning the windows of my mind. And then, the most shocking change. I was in the middle of a stressful workday, with tight deadlines and problems looming. Normally, I would have run to the nearest vending machine, seeking that sugar rush to numb me. But that day, I felt the stress, acknowledged it, took a deep breath, and grabbed a glass of water. The desperate craving, the emotional hunger that had ruled me for so long, was no longer in control. It was a small victory, invisible to the world, but to me, it was monumental. It was the first stone of my new foundation being laid perfectly in place. My body was beginning to remember how to be flexible. It was beginning to understand that it was no longer in danger. I was giving it the ingredients for peace, and it was responding. The weight began to fall off, but in a different way. It wasn't the weak, starving weight loss of the past. I felt strong, energized. The fat around my waist, the one that held all my pain, began to diminish. It was as if, by repairing the internal mortar, my body finally felt safe enough to release the barricades it had built. I was witnessing the first personal proof, the validation of my hypothesis. The Matrix Protocol wasn't a theory. It worked. I was on the right track. This small spark of success gave me the fuel to keep going. But I also knew my rustic approach wasn't sustainable. It was impossible to get the right doses, the necessary purity, by mixing powders and roots in my kitchen. Sometimes I felt a strong effect, other times almost none. The inconsistency was frustrating. I knew that to rebuild the entire cathedral, I would need professional quality mortar mixed with engineering precision. The hypothesis was validated. The proof of concept was right in front of me, on my own skin, in my own peace of mind. Now it was time to scale the operation. It was time to find a way to apply the Matrix protocol consistently, purely, and potently so that the reconstruction could be not only solid, but magnificent. I no longer wanted to simply survive in a patchwork structure. I wanted to live in a fortress. My small personal victory, the proof that the Matrix protocol's rustic approach worked, albeit inconsistently, was the spark that lit a fire under the bridge. I was no longer just grieving or trying to survive. I was on a mission of reconstruction, and every great construction requires research and development. I knew I needed to deepen my knowledge, to understand the science behind my experience. Motivated by this spark of hope, I dove back into research, but this time with a different perspective. I was no longer a victim searching for a cure. I was an architect studying the materials. I began searching for external validation, for social and scientific evidence that corroborated what I was experiencing. And I found it. I found dozens of studies published in endocrinology and nutrition journals that discussed the exact compounds I was hunting, studies that validated the power of adaptogens to modulate cortisol, the echo of betrayal, articles demonstrating how certain polyphenols could in fact improve cell signaling and promote metabolic flexibility. I discovered online communities, groups of women who, like me, had been betrayed by conventional approaches and were searching for deeper answers. They talked about the impact of stress, about hormonal weight gain, about the feeling that their bodies were fighting against them. They shared their own rustic approaches, their victories and frustrations. Reading their accounts was like finding my sisters in the trenches. I saw my own journey mirrored in their stories, and it gave me immense strength. The social proof was there, vibrant and real. I was not alone in my discovery. We were all, in our corners of the world, rediscovering the same ancient truth. To heal the body, we must first calm the storm within. But it was in the midst of this in-depth research that the final epiphany occurred. The epiphany of therapeutic dose and efficacy. Reading a clinical study on one of the root extracts I used, I saw the stark difference in results between the group receiving a placebo, the group receiving a low dose, and the group receiving a high purified dose of the active compound. The efficacy was not linear. There was a point, a therapeutic dose, at which results exploded. Below that, the effect was minimal. Above that, there was no additional benefit. It was a matter of precision. And that's when I realized the limitations of my kitchen. My rustic approach was like giving my body a random amount of that ingredient. I would never know if I was reaching the therapeutic dose. I was trying to build my fortress with mortar of varying quality. One day the mixture was strong, the next it was weak and gritty. That's why my results were inconsistent. That's why I felt that frustration of taking one step forward and half a step back. I reached the logical and inevitable conclusion. For the Matrix protocol to work fully, for the reconstruction to be rapid, solid, and lasting, I needed the exact combination of ingredients in the exact therapeutic dose with maximum purity. I needed a precision that no kitchen in the world could offer, and this precision could only come from one place: a laboratory, a professional formulation, an encapsulated solution that delivered the perfect mortar to my cells every day without fail. The idea of taking a capsule, which had previously seemed like an easy and superficial solution, now had a new meaning. It wasn't a magic pill. It was a precision tool. It was the engineering version of my kitchen alchemy. It was the only way to ensure that every brick of my new life was laid with the strongest and most resilient mortar possible. The narrative journey led me to this conclusion organically. It wasn't a sale. It was the next logical step in my construction journey. I was no longer looking for a solution. I was looking for the best tool to execute the plan I had discovered and validated. And so my search shifted for the last time. I no longer looked for individual ingredients. I began searching for the perfect formula, the capsule that held the key to the Matrix protocol, the precision tool that would finally allow me to complete the work and inaugurate my fortress. My search for the precision tool was methodical, almost surgical. I was no longer susceptible to empty promises or glossy marketing. I had my Matrix protocol, my list of essential ingredients, and an understanding of the need for therapeutic dosage. I became a curator, a formulation detective. I analyzed dozens of products, read labels with the attention of a scientist, and discarded 99% of them for not having the right ingredients, or for having insignificant doses, or for being full of unnecessary additives. And then I found it, a simple bottle with a label that seemed to speak directly to me. It listed the exact adaptogens I'd been researching to soothe the echo of betrayal. It contained the specific polyphenols to promote metabolic flexibility, and the doses were transparent, aligned with what I'd seen in clinical studies. It was as if the scientist who developed it had read the same biology and architecture blog as I had. I ordered it, heart in my mouth, a mixture of skepticism and hope. When the bottle arrived, I held it and felt like I wasn't just holding capsules. I was holding the precision mortar for my work. I started taking it. And the difference between the rustic approach and the precision tool was the difference between walking and flying. The change was swift, profound, and unmistakable. The energy I felt was no longer a spark, it was a steady stream. Sleep was deep and restful every night, and the weight simply began to lift like a heavy coat I finally felt safe to take off. The catalytic tipping point, the moment that sealed it all, came about 3 weeks later. I was late for an appointment and rushed to catch the subway. I ran up 2 flights of stairs, got on the train at the last second, and only when the doors closed and I leaned against the rail, panting, did I realize. My knees weren't aching. I wasn't exhausted. I was just panting from a run. And then I saw my reflection in the dark glass of the subway window, and for the first time in perhaps a decade, I smiled at the woman I saw there. A genuine smile, one of recognition. I knew her. It was me, a stronger, more serene version, with a light in her eyes that I thought betrayal had extinguished forever. It was at that moment that I knew. I knew the war was over. I knew the rebuilding was complete. And I knew I needed to stop everything and speak directly to you who felt invisible, changed, broken, to you who fight against your own body, who punishes yourself with diets and exercise without understanding why nothing truly works. I need you to understand something. Your body is not your enemy. It's operating with the emergency brake on. Trauma, stress, disappointments, the constant pressure of life, all of it pulls on that brake, triggers the echo of betrayal, leaving your metabolism rigid, slow, and in storage mode. You have a powerful engine, an incredible capacity to feel vibrant and full of life, but you're trying to accelerate with the emergency brake on. That's why you feel exhausted, frustrated, and stuck. The solution isn't to accelerate harder, it's to release the brakes. And the urgency I feel in telling you this isn't fear. It's a positive urgency. It's the urgency to see you access your full potential, which is there, blocked. Every day you spend with the brakes on is one less day of a full life, of energy, of joy, of progress that accumulates. Releasing this brake isn't starting from scratch. It's unlocking what's already yours. And that's why, after my journey, I feel compelled to act as your healer. I established rigorous criteria to find the right tool, and I found it. I can't guarantee it will be the solution for everyone, but I can say it was the only one that perfectly aligned with all my research and delivered the results that changed my life. That's why I left a link in the description of this video and in the first pinned comment. It's the link to the same precise formula I used, the only one I trust and recommend. Click there, see for yourself, read the ingredients, understand the science. Give yourself the chance to have the precision tool your reconstruction deserves. If you felt a spark of hope, subscribe to the channel because together we are stronger. Now, let me tell you what happens when the fortress stands. It's not about revenge. Believe me, the best revenge is the serene indifference of someone too busy building their own empire to look back. The true catharsis, the final scene, wasn't about him seeing me and regretting me. It was about me seeing myself and loving myself. It happened 6 months later on a solo trip I took to Europe. I was standing in front of one of those ancient cathedrals, the same one that inspired my search, looking up at its silent strength, its beauty that withstood wars and time. I didn't feel admiration, I felt kinship. I was like her. The scars were there, the history of my pain was etched in me, but they were no longer weaknesses. They were proof of my resilience. In that square, a man approached me, a stranger, and asked me in broken English if I could take his picture. I smiled and agreed, and when he handed me back my phone, he hesitated and said, "Sorry to intrude, but you have a piece around you. It's very beautiful to see." In that moment, I understood everything. The girl who was betrayed on her wedding day was gone. The woman who punished herself with hunger and exhaustion was a distant memory. In her place was an architect, the architect of her own strength, a whole woman, strong and finally at peace. This peace is what I wish for you. The journey to achieve it is what I invite you to begin today. Subscribe, share this video with a woman who needs to hear this message, and click the link. Not to buy a product, but to acquire a tool. The tool that can finally help you let go of the restraints and build the life and body you deserve.